Have you ever thought that maybe, just maybe, our ancestors knew something about our digital future that we've kind of forgotten? Well, today we're going to dive into a pretty radical idea that connects ancient art to the very fabric of your identity. So let me ask you this. When you picture your life story, what do you see? Is it a straight line, just one single narrative moving from birth to yesterday to right now? Yeah, for most of us, that's the default setting.
But what if that simple line is just wrong? What if your identity is actually more like a tree or a coastline? A complex pattern that branches out, loops back on itself, and repeats at every single scale. And this brings us to a really powerful idea, that your mind, your consciousness at its very core, operates just like a fractal, a pattern that endlessly repeats itself no matter how closely you look.
Okay, so there's a name for this, fractal consciousness theory. It basically says our mind isn't a straight line story. Instead, it's constantly looping through memories and models of ourselves. Think about it. The you of today contains patterns of the you from 10 years ago, and even from when you were a kid. It's the same core pattern, just playing out on a different scale. That's what self-similar really means.
And here's where it gets really wild. This isn't some new age idea or something out of a sci-fi novel. Nope. It's an ancient intuition, a kind of hidden blueprint that humans have been expressing for thousands and thousands of years. It's like cultures all over the globe, totally separated by oceans and centuries, all shared this deep, fundamental instinct. They were trying to draw the shape of their own minds. They were literally creating maps of their inner, looping, fractal world. And we see it absolutely everywhere. In the ancient, mesmerizing spirals of Ireland, the interlocking wave patterns in Polynesian art, the complex, looping calendars of the Maya and the Aztecs, and the recursive designs of West African textiles. These weren't just pretty decorations. They were symbolic models of the mind's hidden structure.
All right, so now let's fast forward to today. That ancient human impulse to map the mind has finally found its ultimate tool, the computer. We've essentially created a digital mirror to see ourselves more clearly than ever before. So, the quest is exactly the same, but the tools, they've radically changed. Where ancient cultures used intuition to create these beautiful, symbolic maps of the mind, we now use computation to render that exact same deep architecture with unbelievable precision. Modern fractal art and AI-generated images, they make these abstract ideas visible. We can literally zoom into a pattern and see the whole thing repeated again and again to infinity. We can watch how complex, beautiful order just emerges from a few simple rules. Kind of like how our own complex consciousness emerges. It shows us an identity that stays consistent, no matter what zoom level you're on. But this is way more than just an artistic theory. Because if consciousness really is fractal, it completely changes how we think about the most fundamental human experiences of all, life and death.
See, the straight line model of identity makes death absolutely terrifying. It's the end of the line. Full stop. But if your identity is a pattern, then death isn't an end. It's a transformation. It's a change in scale. The pattern itself doesn't just vanish.
And this leads to a massive shift in perspective, a really profound one. You are not just a single fleeting moment in time. You are the entire, intricate, self-repeating pattern of your whole life. It all boils down to this. We are the pattern, not the moment. This redefines everything. Annihilation becomes just a change in scale. Your identity becomes that persistent, self-similar pattern, the unique fractal that is you, which continues to exist across all of its different forms and iterations. So if this is our true nature, what does all this mean for our future? Well, it suggests that this ancient art form might actually be a tool for becoming the next version of humanity. The idea is that creating, or even just looking at fractal art, isn't a passive thing. It's actually a form of cognitive training, a kind of soft technology that's preparing our minds for an increasingly complex and interconnected future. So how does it do that? Well, first, it trains our brains to think recursively, to see patterns within patterns. Second, it helps us develop what's called multi-scale reasoning, which is the ability to hold a tiny, zoomed-in detail and the massive big picture in our minds at the exact same time. And finally, it helps us build a more fluid, non-linear model of who we are, which is absolutely essential for a world of digital identities and AI augmentation. So, in short, you can think of this art form as a bridge. It's the visual language that connects our current biological minds to the AI-assisted, multi-layered consciousness that might just be our evolutionary future. And that leaves us with one final, fascinating question to think about. Are we just making beautiful, complicated patterns? Or are we, without even realizing it, drawing up a blueprint for the very people we are about to become?